Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. Two, because I'm a fan of punk music. And three, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough from me right now. Let's get into the interview. Before we do that, I'd like to say a big thank you to the folks at Pega for sponsoring my podcast for the coming month. If you don't know Pega, they are a low-code platform for AI-powered decisioning and workflow automation. Its scalable architecture helps the world's leading organizations work smarter, unify experiences, and adapt instantly, so they're always ready for what's next. They've also got their annual conference, Pega World Inspire, coming up, which will focus on how to address constantly shifting perspectives in an ever-evolving world, including guidance, strategies, and powerful tools to achieve resiliency in the face of rapid change. Now, the event will be held virtually on May the 24th from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, which will be for the Americas and European regions, and then again on May the 25th from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time for the Asia Pacific region. The agenda and registration details can all be found at pegaworld.com. Do check it out, and I hope to see you there. Now, let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, we want to talk about shoes, and I want to talk about shoes with Jawad Malik, who is the co-founder of Idrese, a very up-and-coming direct-to-consumer handmade shoe company, no less. I'm really excited to understand about it. I want to talk to Jawad about the start of it, because also my wife loves shoes and things, and I'm kind of wanted to understand a bit more about how small businesses kind of view customer service, customer experience, all that type of sort of stuff. But first of all, I just want to say, Jawad, welcome to the podcast. Nice to kind of like talk to you. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. I've actually been looking forward to this. It's my first podcast, but I hope to kick it out of the park. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you have a podcast newbie. Okay. Well, I promise to be easy on you this time, but maybe we can start off by saying, so Jawad, for people that aren't familiar with Idrese, which I should say is spelled Idrese, and then .com is if you're looking for them, as it were. For people that aren't familiar with you and the work and the shoes that you kind of help people kind of find, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and the work that you do and where you've kind of come from, your background, all that type of stuff?
Yeah. Look, Idrese came up into the market for the same reason before the podcast started, that your wife Anna was so in love with shoes, and she wanted to look for a certain fabric, maybe denim, maybe a tartan, and she wasn't able to find it. I think where Idrese comes into play is personalization and customization are the future of apparel. People don't want mass-produced footwear because of the environmental impact it has and the lack of uniqueness involved. So bespoke footwear, on the other hand, is way too expensive. At Idrese, we took the best of both worlds and made affordable luxury, under $400. So by taking premium traditional Goodyear construction and modern day technology, we were able to fill the gap in the market for unique, high quality, yet attainable footwear. Right. And so people like your wife are able to find unique fabrics, but also we have a maintenance of high quality construction. So you get the best of both worlds, and it's all for under $400. So if you're familiar with Alden, Allen Edmonds, Loke, Church's shoes, we're priced well under them by 50 to 150 to maybe even $200. So although we allow people to have extremely high footwear, we try to make it attainable, but also due to the fact that we're single batch production orders, we don't have any shoes that end up in landfills. We don't have shoes sitting in the warehouse. So the shoes you get are the shoes you ordered, and you'll smell them, you'll feel them, you'll know that they were just made 3 days ago before they reached you. So,
nice.
Yeah.
I mean, and so you mentioned one of the brands there. I mean, I'm a fan of Loke's shoes, and I've been wearing them for years, so I'm familiar with the space. Probably not as adventurous as Hannah is on some of the styles that she kind of used, but maybe I need to kind of embrace some of that a little bit myself. But I know that when we were introduced, I was really interested in it, and not just because of the handmade shoes sort of thing, but it's like also because I was really interested in your story, and I know there's a bit of a backstory to this. I mean, how do you come to build a brand that sells handmade kind of luxury shoes?
Man, so where do I even start, right? Because this was almost something that happened before I was even born. My dad was in the liquidation business. So let's just say a factory or a store were to flood or smoke. What my father would do is he would come and take all the salvageable items. And so some brands would be Levi's jeans, other brands would be Nike and Puma. Some brands he would go to Italy and you would see the Carson's sticker or the Nordstrom sticker of clearance sale tags of these high quality shoes. And my dad would take them, he would delabel them, he would ship them to second and third world countries. And what got to a point of me traveling with him and understanding the products that he sold. And one time he just got a big case of really high quality shoes from Italy. The place flooded. He bought them from the insurance company for cheap and he exported them to Jordan. And man, I was selling shoes as a young kid. And how do I even explain it? I was a cute kid. That's why I made money. I don't think it was really anything that I intrinsically had, even though people like to think that entrepreneurs are born with it. It's kind of just getting out there at a young age.
Wow.
Yeah. And go ahead. I feel like you wanted to say something.
So, I was going to say, is like, I thought you were going to hold up your hands and like, these hands have been making shoes since they were kind of like 4 years old. And you're like going, no.
All the callus. Yeah. No, it got forgotten about at some point. What I really loved was systematics, building something and selling something and really dealing with people. And that's what I loved. And all those shoes were forgotten about by the time I reached college, my junior year. I was like, I have to do something. I want to build something. And so I went back to what I enjoyed. So I remember my father giving me a $20,000 tuition check, which God bless him for even helping me. Sometimes people say they got there on their own. I look at around me and I don't think people are blessed enough to be able to have somebody that can assist them through college. So I would say it's a point of privilege, but I took that, I bought a Subaru, and man, when I tell you I Ubered from sun up till sundown. I think I made like 74,000 my first year, and I enjoyed none of it. It went towards the business. So I was just living day by day, trying to learn like how to market, how to get my product out there, how to even find the right supplier. Man, I would be in front of the computer for days. I'd be traveling to places in Italy, just knocking door to door with my uncle, just trying to find somebody that'll give me an opportunity. And the barrier to entry to footwear is high. So I was like, I need somebody who does made to order. And I started with this factory. I asked them for a shoe. They're like, we're happy to do a sample for you. I'm like, all right, I want it to look this way. I was like, you know what? Maybe I could sell samples, quote unquote, of these unique shoes. And so I would get an order from like a friend or a family. I would say, okay, I want it like this. It's a sample. And they're like, it's a sample, right? Like you're not running a business. And I'm like, at some point I admitted I'm running a business and I need this. And slowly we built a technology to handle this custom feature, which is by far amazing. We have other brands who use it. And it just went from there. It went from 50 iterations of a website, how to advertise on Google, how to reach out to people, how to talk to them and say, hey, we got something good here. And slowly we got a brand now that's 3 years in. We sold several thousand shoes. We're not out of the woods. I feel like COVID affected us, but every day's a journey, man.
Yeah.
Every day's a journey.
I did notice, however, because I've been on we're in the right now at the time of recording, Hannah and I are in the middle of a sort of a house move, and I know that I was going to get some because I need some kind of like shoes because I got some tartan trews, very nice, and I need some shoes to go with them. And so I'm going to be on there kind of like as soon as we get a new sort of permanent sort of address, then I'll have them kind of shipped there. So I've seen the platform and it's all kind of great, but I did notice it's only men's shoes. And then when I told my wife about it, she was like, what? She being the big lover of shoes in all of this. And she also wants to know, do you have any plans to expand to women's shoes too?
Yeah, so we have a lot of women's footwear in the background, but the biggest struggle for me is right now is not spreading myself thin.
Right.
I don't have any capital backing. Again, I started this with Uber, right? So, what I made is what I invested in the business, and I lived with my parents, and that's where I like saved up. And
well, it's the entrepreneur's life, right?
Yeah, and then you got this amount of money. It's like, where does it have the most effect? And as you build each step, you want to kind of invest in more and more R&D. And one of those is eventually women. But the more that I talked to you and when I spoke to your wife before we started the podcast, I realized it's not that hard. It's just going to take me time. And I just got to put in that time and make it feasible for men and women to have access to my products. And the products are there. So it's like a why not? And so it's not a matter of if, but when.
Yeah, it's like, watch this space, it's coming.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to ask, so I know I spelt it out. And Idrese, I wanted to point out, it's like Idrese is an interesting name because when we were talking about sort of setting up the podcast and we kind of like were having a chat and I mentioned, that I'd spent some time in the Middle East and you've got like a Middle Eastern sort of like heritage and stuff. And you told me the story about Idrese because it's an interesting name and I wanted you to tell me the story behind that because I think it's just really. It's just really, I think it's just a really personal sort of like thing, but it's a really cool kind of story. And I think it's where I just want you to share it with me again.
Yeah. One of the things that people get held up on when starting business is what do we call it? And do we call it something simple? And then you look and you see that those things are unavailable and you call it something complex. Well, are people going to remember that? I tried to really dig deep as to why I want to pick this name. Idrese is one of the first few prophets in the Abrahamic religions, better known in some religions as Enoch or Enoch. I don't know if I'm saying that right, Adrian, but I remember mentioned
Enoch, yes, or
Enoch.
Or Idris.
Or Idris, yeah. Or in the Middle East, we say Idris, but I know some people say Idris. And so he was known for his honesty, integrity, and quality. And I'm like, hey, man, also in Welsh, Idris means prince. And my last name is Malik, so it also means prince. I just feel like it's tied together. It's a brand that is honest, that's true, that gives you and delivers a product that is necessary. It's also a name that ties to me. And it makes me feel like I'm a part of the story. So every time I wake up, it's what message am I sending? And I think it's a good turn for this podcast because it's on customer experience. And I remember I told you the story before we planned this of how this is not Idris himself. This was during the Prophet Muhammad's time in which there was this individual who was selling garments with a defect. And although people loved them and they weren't aware of the defect, he never actually mentioned it because he's like, they love them, they're taking them. And so he came back to the Prophet and said, man, I made good money. And he's like, did you tell him about the defect? And then he didn't. So he made them go back and tell him about the defects. And I think that's how I want to run my life. And also if I run my life this way, my business runs this way. And they say always, before you try to change your community, change your family. And before you try to change your family, change yourself. So, man, it's me holding myself to a high standard. So one day when I reach a level to where my business is up there, I can say it's run by good ethics. because I'm ethical. And
that's a great story. I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think and it really kind of like, it completely ties into that idea of making things available, quality products, and that's the standard that you're holding yourself to, and I think that you've aligned the name of the brand to kind of that intent, and which has such deep meaning and connection for you. I think is brilliant. But also the other thing I kind of like wanted to ask is, because I talk about largely kind of like customer service and customer experience on the kind of podcast, and I know that you pride yourself on providing a great experience and great service. So because you talked about the kind of the future of experiences, personalization and customization, particularly in apparel, whether it's clothing or footwear or whatever. But I wanted to understand kind of like what that meant for a small and growing kind of brand, because much of the talk in the sort of the industry space is generally focused on large brands, and large brands, big technology platforms, and all data and all this type of stuff. And I wanted just to kind of like to almost like drop it right down and go like, here's a young man who is got something great going on, is kind of self-funding, is kind of like priding himself on, operating from his kind of a place of real heart and, and intent. I wanted to kind of understand what does service and experience mean for you?
Man, that is a very complex question. So let me know if I'm talking a lot. Okay. But good customer experience, first of all, is basic. Think at you as yourself in a shop. You are an owner of a shop. You want to smile and you want to make somebody feel heard. Hey, can I help you? And so sometimes when people enter a website, it's very complex, it's very confusing, and there is no, can I help you? So by having a good user experience, by having a flow on your website, if people need help, they can reach out. If people don't know where to start, they're guided. That's good service. And when they buy the product, right, they're buying the product with the intention that you are true to your word. You're saying it's high quality, it's made in Spain, it's Goodyear welt, it's comfortable. And I think a lot of brands these days like to say that stuff, but when you compare their shoes to other shoe brands, they're not comfortable. They're very thin. They're very this, they're very that. Mm-hmm. So they try to kind of finesse their way and hope people have tried lower quality shoes and this is really nice for them. I just try to give them the best. You know what I mean? So when they're in a store and they get a good product, I want to make sure that when they're on the website, they're feeling in somewhat the same way. Keep it simple. They ask for this, you treat them with respect, and then you give them what they're asking for. And some customers will come and leave a review. They're like, amazing service, amazing product. Mm-hmm. And I don't even recall seeing that guy reaching out to customer service at all. Mm-hmm. And that goes to my second point is our shoes take a month or less to hand make. So they start from scratch. It's single batch order. Sometimes you can't change the logical side of a business model. You can't say, well, all right, we got to make shoes 1 week in 1 week so people aren't waiting. Well, quality goes down. Workers, our craftsmen are overworked. And so we go from a psychological base. And I'll give you an example of this, like O'Hare Airport in Chicago. People were really, really mad about waiting in line for their bags to come.
Right.
And so they can't logically say, okay, we got to get the bags out faster because it takes time. So what do they psychologically do? They place the baggage claim for that plane at a distance. So by the time they walk there, they didn't feel like they're waiting. Complaints plummeted. Another example would be Japan's system. It was very complex. People didn't know when they were going to get there. Their complaints was trains took too long. So what did the city do? Logically, they can't just speed up the trains twice their speed, but they started putting maps, started informing people on the train. Complaints went down. So with Idrese, it takes 4 weeks or less. During that time, do we leave the customer in the dark? Does he always guess, oh, it might be here today, it might be here tomorrow? Absolutely not, right? So part of a good customer experience is sending them trigger emails. Hey, your shoes are asking about you. This is what your shoes went through in the phase 1 of production. And then the second email will get, and then it'll tell them on the bottom, am I going to get another email, Jawad? And they'll say, yes, you'll get an email in 7 to 14 days. It's very interactive. It keeps people up to date. And we had that problem. We're like, man, logically, we'd like to drive production time down, but we couldn't. So we had to go to a psychological manner in which we are personalizing our emails. We're reaching out to people who are saying, hey, when you reply to this email, it goes straight to me. And that's just another third of it, right? Give people the product that they want and then keep them up to date, constantly over communicate. So they're not the ones reaching out to you. It's not a burden to them to hear from you. And then the third one would be if they're not happy and you can't make everybody happy, try to deal with it as best as you can. And I struggle with this too, because there are customers who take advantage. Some customers will look at my website and they're like, oh, this is easily a multi-million-dollar website. And the owner's sitting back saying, look at these fools buying shoes, you know? And it's not like that. It's not a Costco. We struggle. And it's important for the customer to know we are here for them. But there's some customers that go the extra mile. And what I do is my best moment there is to give them their money back. Say, unfortunately, we are not comfortable doing this, and try to end it as peacefully as possible. And I think that's still good customer service. I remember, how do I say this? Maybe you like a lot of Middle Eastern philosophy or linguistics, I feel. You say humans, I believe I told you this, as insan. Yeah. The forgetful. The root word of humans in Arabic is forgetful. And as I'm telling you this, there are moments where there's some things I couldn't control, but I was responsible for. There were times where I was financially unable to accommodate a customer, and it would financially impact me. And there are times where the customer was so difficult and I was just fed up to where I could have done something. But between those moments, there's always a 5-10 minute conversation with the other side that you're not willing to have. And I try to jump in those. I'm like, man, I could ignore him. I could do this. I could do that. But let me dive in. And I have this mentality of, if you can't get out of it, get into it. Right. And, I mess up sometimes. Some customers will tell me what I'm saying right now is absolute bullcrap. And, thousands of customers, one customer, two customers, absolutely. I know they'll look at me this way. And it's because I'm forgetful. There are times where I could drop the ball or the equation just doesn't match up for both parties. And I think what makes a good leader is knowing when you mess up and knowing when there's things you can't change and taking those and implementing them and making sure they are limited in the future. And I think remember I told you I could talk about this? I feel like there's levels to this that I have not yet understood I'm hoping to.
Yeah, no, I think it's always going to be a learning kind of journey, Jawad, and I think that, but it sounds like I always kind of say it's like, I always like to think is you can't know everything, but as long as you've got the right sort of intent, then you can probably going to go and try and figure things out. Yeah. And people will appreciate the fact that you show up. And you might not get it right all of the time, but they'll appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I guess it's like one of the big challenges is going to be, I think the demand is going to go up. It's like, yes, you say that kind of that COVID has definitely affected you, but then as people get out and about and, hopefully the things start to really mature again, that, you're going to grow. And I guess my question is, so how do you plan on maintaining standards and that sort of thing? How do you codify it? Is it about culture? Is it finding about the right people? Have you thought about that yet? Or is that kind of case of, well, we're just going to have to journey and figure it out as we go? Or where are you at with that?
You said that in the latter, it's a journey. Do we figure it out? I try to be a bit of both. Like I look for inspiration, but I don't also want to copy the wheel, because you also have to always be unique, right? So I want to leave space to figure it out. But for the most part, I know psychologically, look, it's like me texting my girlfriend, right? If I don't get a response in an hour, I'm kind of going to get worried. I'm going to get bothered. There's these thoughts that are going to go in my head. So humans want quickness. And so cutting down response times, making sure there's a responsibility on response times. I also noticed that sometimes you may not have the answer. You may not know what to tell this customer, like, where are my shoes, and the factory is closed, but you can look up on the back office that there's some things, there's a QC incident, or there's just a slight delay with DHL, like the shoes are sitting at a port. You just got to be honest. You got to be like, hey, you know what? I'm on this. I'm going to get back to you. And I want to create a system in which the customer doesn't really need to reach out, but when they do, it's quick response times. It's not that hard. It really is not that hard. If the people that I'm having as a part of the company join in and they're unable to be proactive in replying, then I just think it's not a business issue, unless I'm overworking them, unless they need somebody next to them to help them answer these emails. Look, I did it for 3 years. You email us now, it'd probably be the person who helps me, Christina, or it'll be me. And guess what? It's always going to be quick, like 98% of the time. But there are times where you drop the ball. There's a failure rate, and so
I guess if you're kind of, you've automated a lot of the intake and the design and the production kind of and the delivery, all of that sort of like stuff, then it's like you've just got to deal with the kind of the variation in between, I guess.
Yeah, like what if somebody wants a return? Are you going to ignore them for a week? No, you got to be quick with that, because those people are the most anxious. Those people, they're like ordering online. They've already got a paranoia about that. Then they're ordering. They don't know if the person is going to respond, and so you're not talking to them for 24 hours. They're like, I'm getting screwed over. I'm getting scammed, and we don't want them to feel this way. And there are chances they might come back just from the customer service alone. So imagine the sunk cost that's happening. And I just think if you multiply 100 customers and you grow by 100, eventually what in the beginning only costs you one customer is costing you thousands. And it's all because you kind of lacked respect on getting to them in time.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a thing in, I don't know if you're familiar with this, there's an idea in service called the service recovery paradox. And well, it's not a strategy for success. So don't go causing problems so you can recover from them. But what it says is that when a problem arises and you recover well on that problem, you're fast, so quick to respond, and and respond to the customer's kind of like satisfaction, delight, or whatever, or even just plainly to their satisfaction. Their level of satisfaction post that recovery is at a higher level than if nothing had happened. And the reason why that generally works is because people don't like problems. They don't like failure, as it were. And therefore, when somebody steps in and helps, kind of like, and does it with speed and efficiency and effectiveness and everything else, they think well of that person or that kind of that organization because they've helped them recover from that. But that response, and if it's been a positive response, can generate kind of a higher level of satisfaction. So there's the payoff to stepping in and solving kind of things, whether it's a return or it's a problem, a delivery problem or whatever, in quick kind of time, because people respect it. People kind of like, and people do, and they value it.
Is it called the recovery paradox?
It's service recovery paradox.
So I feel like that's at an all-time high now, especially during the peak 2010, 2015. All these Alibaba sites are coming out. And so you got somebody building a website overnight, selling things that they don't even understand overnight, with shipping times are 3 to 6 months. And, it created a flood of customers coming in and purchasing from these sites that were being generated overnight. So I just think people are more hurt now. They're more aware of, am I going to get screwed over? So they look for trust more. And they do that through social media, through seeing how many people have reviewed it, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just feel like now, if you don't respond to a customer, it's going to be much worse than it was 10 years ago, because that customer has probably gotten burnt in the past. And so now they're looking at you like you might possibly burn them. When compared to 10 years ago, maybe people didn't feel burnt as much as they do now. So it's kind of the evolution of customers too. Like this is just one of the ways customers evolve. And it's interesting.
So one of the big things I think right now is a big challenge for for brands everywhere, but also kind of like for customers. So you mentioned it right at the beginning of the conversation. Is that you talked about customization, personalization is kind of the future, and like so customers want that personal service, that personal experience, and brands want to deliver it, but many of them are not getting it kind of right. I mean, so where's your thinking on the kind of the personalized experience for Idrese? I mean, is that just in the whole? It's just embedded in the kind of the whole make your own shoes, as it were, design your own shoes.
Personalization can be defined in so many ways. In terms of, it can be as simple as having it coded into your emails. Like, let's just say the second phase of production, they're going to get, hey, your shoes are asking about you. It's going to say their name. I think that has a big impact on customer retention, is knowing that these are just not mass-produced emails, but my name is there. In reality, they are mass-produced emails, but they're set there so that you can feel heard. And, that's the premise of our whole business, is we want to cater to you. And so I don't necessarily think it's a negative thing that we're sending flow emails to you in a personalized manner, but that's mostly how e-commerce companies personalize. One way I personalize is I find that people need help designing. And so I one time went to Prada, and I noticed that they have a custom platform that looks just like mine. So I was like, oh, that's interesting, But I also, sometimes people take things, you can't do anything. You got to just look at the positives. What can I learn from them, right? So I looked at it, and they had this thing on the bottom that says, text us or call us, and we can get somebody on the line to help you. That's another form of personalization, creating touch points between your brand and the customer in a humanized manner. But in this way, you're actually talking to a human rather than getting a coded message. And I think that's another way to personalize. A third way to personalize is customers who order more than one shoe. Are they getting unique emails, or are they just being treated like as a new customer? And we want to make sure that those people are getting personalized messages that make them feel heard and make them feel like, hey, you do deserve to receive more because of your loyalty to the brand. I think that's you should see the statistics on this. The retention of customers that come just by making them feel heard is large, and it's between success and failure for many brands. And it's imperative to learn it. And I don't think I've learned everything, but there are some things that stick to me, and I think personalization can be forgotten.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Particularly when you get caught up in the thick of things, and sometimes the kind of little personal touches can make all the difference. But you talk about forgetting things and how we're forgetful. Is there anything else that that you'd like to add or highlight that we've missed out or forgotten to talk about before I take a step back and ask you to kind of give me a bit of a broader view that is sort of non-Idrese, but kind of more of a broader view of what you're seeing in the market and things. So anything else you'd like to highlight about Idrese and your story and things that before we kind of we move on to some more kind of general questions?
To be honest with you, it's clear cut. We take classic craftsmanship and modern day technology, and we give people a very unique experience. But really what's important is right now, fast fashion has really begun to destroy our environment. If you look at Zara, H&M, waters are getting poisoned. Our people all around the world are losing their human rights. And a lot of these big brands now are leveraging the ability to influence laws around the world to take advantage of people. And then those shoes, those clothings from Zara, H&M, Aldo end up here. And, sometimes you'll read an article in which they found a rat within the seams of a coat, or you'll find a message in the pocket of a shirt of a person who was a slave laborer. And I just think sometimes we look at H&M, we think of Bella Hadid or think of a model, but we tend to really forget the environmental and the humanitarian impacts behind it. I don't know if you know this, but Spain has the most strict labor laws. It's a 4-day work week now. Mm-hmm. Just last week, women on their menstrual cycle could take 3 to 4 days off. Our craftsmen have 20 plus years of experience, most of them still making shoes for the same manufacturer that we supply from. And why is it? Is it because they're forced to be there? No, I just think because they're treated with respect, they're treated like humans. And then you got the other side of it. What happens to the clothes that don't get sold? And they end up in third world countries, ends up poisoning their water system. It ends up increasing their the amount of litter they have. I would really like to send you some documentaries. There's a book called Fashionopolis that'll really open up your mind on this. And
I know the fashion industry has got like a big waste problem.
Yeah, one of the things I tell my customers when they get shoes, like smell them, like they're fresh. Like that leather is brand spanking new. It hasn't been sitting in a warehouse. It's still got those particles of freshness really releasing. And that's what I'm really proud of. And, the shoes that don't sell, we donate them. And I'm not trying to look like a saint, but they're good tax write-offs too. You get to do something good and they don't end up in landfills. And it's kind of just keeping this whole story going. Nice. Some directions, the degree of environmental awareness is more than other degrees, but sometimes we want to help and we end up helping the environment as well by not throwing the shoes away. Nice. So there's so many ways. But yeah, I mean, look, Idrese is a shoe company. It's not the Messiah. We just try absolutely. To do our part. Yeah.
But I tell you what, I do. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, Jawad, is because one, I like the story. I like I like what it kind of means. I like what it stands for. I like the way that it's an evolving story. I like the fact that it's a direct to consumer kind of brand that's it's growing and it's developing, and you're very honest about not having it figured out, and it's and it's kind of self-funded and things, but you're thinking about things in all sorts of different kind of like ways, which even as a small business, I would say probably puts a lot of larger businesses to shame, because you're trying to think about the kind of the broader sort of picture. And it's something that I talk about in this, the new book that I wrote, The Punk XL, is like, we can't just talk about customer experience in isolation. We have to talk about the whole picture and the impact. And it's a customer and employee and stakeholder and the bigger picture and impact and all this.
I think there's a huge stakeholder issue in America in which it's profits over everything. And so all these people, you'll also, all these big brands you'll see are talking about environmental friendliness, but they'll never put that over a stakeholder. They'll never put humanitarian rights overseas over what the stakeholder wants, because they'll get sued. They'll get sued to oblivion. Some of them, they'll sit down, they're like, yes, we have an environmental impact agreement that we're trying to work on and fulfill, but it's all just a look. Mm-hmm. And I keep wondering that myself, like, physiologically, as you gain more wealth, as you gain more power, as you gain more influence, am I open to corruption? And that's a fear, man. It's a fear, because if you are God conscious like I am, which I'm not very vocal about, there's something at the end of that I'm going to be held accountable for. And but man, it's difficult, because at the end of the day, I want to be a good guy with money to counteract the bad guys with money, right? But at what point can you go no further, because your ethics are at stake? Someone is getting put down because they're going up, and it's tough.
Well, that's going to be that. Hopefully, that's going to be, well, not hopefully. I guess that's probably going to be somewhere on the journey for you, and it'll be something you need to kind of like tackle. But what you've said, I think you're probably going to. You'll tackle that, and you'll take that in your stride when it when it shows up. But I think that we must admit. I mean, all this, you talk about learning and stuff, and you talk about kind of self-fundingness and driving an Uber, and doing all that sort of like stuff and to create this kind of brand, which is brilliant. I mean, you know, I've been thinking about the this idea that we're emerging from. I'm calling them, I guess, in air quotes, the pandemic years, because it sounds like something out of
the New World Order.
Oh, something like that. Yeah, we're emerging out of the pandemic years, and I was thinking about kind of what some of the. I've been asking people what some of the big lessons they've learned over the last couple of years, and what do you think, and how will that inform how you do things kind of going forward? I mean, so what are some things that you've learned? Because I mean, I asked this.
That's a good question.
To people that work for big corps or so on and so forth, but I'd appreciate your take as somebody that's, you know, got your. You know, it's not the ideal kind of time to you know, you started 3 years ago, so that would make it, you started in 2019.
Yeah, right out of college.
Right, so 2019, right out of college, started the business, and then boom, 2020 happened.
I'm selling dress shoes and no one's going to work.
There you go. And you're like going, damn.
Yeah, you know, right now our biggest thing is to expand our sneaker line and our casual line, because although people are really going back to the work, there's huge working from home culture growing. And then there's also a casual kind of fashion statement that's growing too, where you'll see Cole Haan selling dress shoes, but with extra light soles for long distance walking or comfort. And Cole Haan's owned by Nike. So they're really just focused on, I wouldn't say comfort, I would just say mesh and proper, you know, soles. But biggest thing I learned is to keep up with the times. You know, one of the laws to power is keeping your ear to the ground. And one of those ways is staying youthful. Sometimes as we grow, we become more rigid. And I see that in myself now, even at 25. And so it's all about being flexible in your thought. Like, hey, people are definitely going to go back to the office after pandemic. That's not true. You know, keep your mind open, keep yourself flexible in thought, because there's where you'll find the opportunities, you know? Another thing is the smaller easier it is to pivot. And I'm realizing bigger companies have a hard time pivoting, because you got to think of Allen Edmonds. They had all these dress shoes sitting in their warehouses. And so now they got a inventory problem. Their money's probably sunk into it. And now those sales are limited, but they're seeing a growth in their casual wear. Well, they need to invest more in their casual wear. And I just think that the ability to take funds and put it into one area while you still have sunk cost in another area, I think it makes it hard to pivot. With me as a small company, I realized run it lean for as long as you can, because if situations arise, you want to be able to pivot as quickly as possible, and keep yourself youthful, keep your brain flexible, and and listen to the changing winds. You know, keep saying, okay, where are people going and where's the culture headed? Because you always want to be in line with it. And I guess that's what I tell myself.
Awesome. I mean, Jawad, it's talked about a lot, and it's been great. I've loved getting your kind of perspective and hearing the story.
Am I talking a lot, Adrian?
Yeah, but that's fine. This is a talking podcast. What the people, you know, like, if people are bored, you can press stop now. But if not, we're just going to keep going. But I, with all of these sort of things, we can talk about, we wonder about all this kind of different things, and that's all. It's all cool. But I also kind of like people to boil it down, as it were, because sometimes, you know, I know that people appreciate sort of direct recommendations, as it were. And if I would say to you, Jawad, what would be your best advice to someone that's listening in that wants to improve their customer service or their customer experience? What would it be?
I think if they're listening to this podcast now, they're doing exactly what they're doing. I mean, they need to be doing.
Flattery, you'll get you everywhere.
No, like it's the constant need to learn. It's having good ethics. And physiologically, we're tied to a story. So when you wake up, what's your story? Is it based on good or bad? And if it's based on bad, if it's based on, I want to get this and do this so I can show this guy that I did it, you're not going to really treat your customers well. It's going to be a very selfish reason as to why you're pursuing things. Make sure that it's a good reason. And when you have good ethics, man, you're going to be tested on it all the time. And so when the doors are closed and no one's watching, are you holding yourself accountable? And I think good way of giving good customer service is making sure you and your workers are holding each other accountable to the customer, because at the end of the day, that's your livelihood. And
nice.
Am I answering this question, Adrian, correctly?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Yeah?
That's
okay.
Absolutely perfect.
Because sometimes I forget that I'm a small team, and so I'm trying to think of who would be listening to this. Do they have a bigger team than me?
Doesn't
and I'm
matter. You know how sometimes kind of people talk about how. So in the kind of the last book I wrote, I talked about, or one of the contributors talked about the hippo, and it's one of those. It stands for it's a sort of an acronym or kind of an abbreviation, which means the highest paid person's opinion. So often, when you're in kind of meetings or gatherings of people, you can get kind of people that it's sometimes the highest paid person's opinion is the only thing that really matters, right? And it sort of like swamps everybody else's. But actually, brilliance and insight can come from all sorts of places. And whether it's the most junior member of the team or the kind of the newest customer or the person that's just newly started their business and is just kind of battling the way. So I'm interested in insight from everybody at every stage of the journey, because actually, like to your point, it's about being open.
It's about being malleable, yes.
Yeah, and to learn, and because that's kind of where kind of insight kind of comes from.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Black Swan?
Is that Nicholas Taleb?
It is. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It's one of my favorite books, although it's incredibly hard to understand. The idea of the Black Swan came from Europeans. They always thought swans were white. And then they built their idea of this truth that all swans are white, when in reality, as they began to explore, they noticed swans were black. And so the idea behind that is, if you're not open to new information, you're always going to have this false sense of truth in your head. You're going to be like, all swans are white. And then one day there's going to be a huge event that's going to come that you're not going to be prepared for, and you're going to find a black swan. Mm-hmm. And that's going to either put you under or over. And, when you tell me that there are some leaders that the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion, I just think that opens up a huge black swan scenario, because that dude has false truths in his head because of his lack of gathering perspective. And now he's speaking those false truths into existence, and people wake up every day for that company based on these false narratives. And eventually they're going to wake up and say, well, this was wrong. And we should have seen it all along. And it was so simple. It was so obvious, but it's because they didn't have their ear to the ground. They weren't aware of what was around them. And that happens all the time, man. And that's why you got to be super analytical. You got to be the type of person who's, I forgot the word for it, but skeptic. You got to be a skeptic. Mm-hmm. And you got to always tell yourself, where am I wrong? Or where could I be wrong? Mm-hmm. And I think that puts you ahead of a lot of people. And sometimes a small company like me might arise out of nowhere just because there's a bigger company like Alan Edmonds who thought they knew better. And I kept saying, I don't know better. Like, what can I know better? And that's what got me to where I am. Nice. So it's about removing false truths. Yeah.
Awesome. So Jawad, just a couple more questions for me before we can wrap up. And these are questions I've been asking to everybody on the podcast for the last kind of few years. That ever since I published kind of Punk CX, and they're like kind of word association sort of things, just to try and get a bit of a view on it. And the first question is so I wrote this book called Punk CX back in 2019, and I've been asking people ever since kind of then. So what one or two words would you describe, or would you use to describe a more punk approach to customer experience?
Guerrilla tactics. I just think you gotta be super unique with your approach. Something that, like I told you last time, you told me, I think I brought Costco up in this about how you want to keep things open. So you can let uniqueness come in, creativity flow into how you want to approach things. But you also want to take some pointers from people who are doing really well. You don't want to copy them completely because you're not allowing yourself to come up with that punk idea, that creative idea that really sets you apart from other companies. Right now, you'll see a punk approach footwear companies are doing by saying, hey, we'll send you the shoes at zero cost. You try them out. If you don't like them, you send them back. If you do like them, we'll just send you an invoice and you can close your shoes out. And I think that's a very punk approach where they're saying, hey, we'll reduce all the anxieties you have. We'll just send you the shoes, you know? And I think that increases the customer experience. I think there's going to be a moment where people who weren't going to buy end up buying, and then they're going to be funneled into the email marketing, the advertising, the community that they are suddenly a part of people wearing the same shoes and trading ideas. And they'll go and watch YouTube videos about the brand. And I just think they're joining the community by having this very punk approach that just came out of nowhere. And I just think that's what I think of as guerrilla tactics. It's like, what's different? What's unique?
Nice.
Yeah.
And so the second, so thank you for that. And so the second and final question is that the follow-up book to Punk 6 was called Punk XL. And it's around this idea that we need to think more holistically about experience, the customer and employee, the stakeholder, the whole shooting match. But I wanted to get your take on what company or brand do you think is like an experience leader? Like who's setting the bar and why?
Man, does it have to be like a e-commerce leader? It could be anybody.
It could be anybody. You could also quite kind of legitimately turn around and go, I don't think anybody's cutting it right now.
Yeah, you know what? I'll give you two good, two bad. So Right now, I think Costco and IKEA are doing a good job. They take care of their workers, they simplify things for their customers, and they provide a good angle of great prices and affordability, attainability, which is becoming a struggle for more and more Americans every day. The bad ones that I want to bring up are Amazon and Walmart. In which they feed off of the taxpayers' money by granting, majority of their workers are overworked, underpaid, and some of them rely on the system for welfare. And so that's the blood-sucking type. Sometimes I feel you got to compare the good with the bad. And I just think that if you look at IKEA, you look at Costco, people process products, right? Like what Marcus Lemonis always says. Good people, it's a good process, and it's a great product. And I don't think I think that's the answer. I think they're doing it right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Jawad, thank you for that. I mean, that's all I kind of have. And so, first of all, I want to say congratulations on where you've gotten to.
Thank you.
And keep going, man. Because I think, I know that my wife wants you to keep going because she's she's looking forward to her shoes when you do the women's line. And I'm looking forward to kind of ordering some kind of too to go with my tartan trews that, I think are going to look splendid.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see what you come up with.
Yeah. So, but keep, I was probably going to be really quite rudimentary. I think I might go with some kind of like the kind of like brogue boots or something. I think those are probably quite cool.
Yeah.
But I want to say congratulations on your success. Congratulations on the journey. Keep going. But also, more importantly and more immediately, just want to say thank you for sharing your time and your energy and your insight with us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Could I leave off with something, Adrian?
Of
I just
course.
feel like since we're here and I'm talking, something that my ex-girlfriend reminded me. One time she called me and she was at a tire shop and she said, hey, I don't know what tire to get. I don't know how much it's going to cost. I don't know if the person that's selling me this is a friendly or is he a scammer. I don't know what's going on. And then I told her, the life of an entrepreneur, the life of a businessman is very much the same thing. Every time you wake up, you're crying. You don't know what's going on. You're trying to figure it out. You're trying to see how much things cost, if the person is trying to help you or hinder you. And I just think that's life. I think that's what makes a good customer experience, is constantly exploring and being open and seeing how other people are doing it and just trying to be unique in your approach and learning as you go. And it's a never ending journey. So yeah, man, that's for me first and foremost.
Well, that feels like a brilliant note to end it on. So, Jawad, thank you so much.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you. It was fun.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do, actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.